Now call on Graham Day to close to the Government. Minister, please.
Presiding Officer, let me begin by joining members who have congratulated Liam MacArthur for bringing this debate to the Chamber, because it's entirely fitting that Scotland's Parliament should set aside time to reflect on the night of the 17th of March 1969 and the Longhope tragedy, and alongside that have an opportunity to highlight the heroism of the crews of the RNLI. And can I pay tribute to Mr MacArthur for his moving opening speech, and indeed others for their very thoughtful contributions. The 50th anniversary of that dreadful tragedy in which 8 men lost their lives while trying to save the crew of the SS Irene. Coxswain Daniel Kirkpatrick, second coxswain James Johnson, bowman Ray Kirkpatrick, mechanic Robert Johnson, assistant mechanic James Swanson, and crewman Jack Kirkpatrick, Robert Johnson and Eric McFadgen, serves to remind us all of the price that has been paid by our coastal communities helping seafarers in peril, because it is from the ranks of ordinary men and women living in communities dotted around the coastline that the RNLI crews are drawn from. It is a hugely laudable and frankly staggering statistic that over the 195 years since the formation of the National Institution for the Preservation of Life from Shipwreck, as it was originally titled, the RNLI has, as Donald Cameron highlighted, saved over 142,000 lives. Alongside that sits the sobering stat that 778 crew have paid the ultimate price while seeking to rescue those fellow mariners. And behind that second figure lies so many tragedies which have devastated the communities that crewed the lifeboats concerned. Maureen Watt reminded us of the Fraserburgh lifeboat disaster. My own constituency was touched by another such event, the loss 65 years ago of the Robert Lindsay based in Arbroath as it returned to harbour from a rescue mission. 6 crew perished. The tragedy remains woven into the fabric of the port, indeed the county, and so too the tiny 30-strong community of Brims and Longhope, which suffered the loss of a quarter of its population with the capsizing of the TGB in 1969. What made the Longhope tragedy particularly awful was the close and lasting family connections within the crew. As we've heard, there will be a commemoration of the tragedy on Sunday the 17th of March at the Longhope Bay Museum. As Liam MacArthur revealed, the organisation of the commemoration has been led by Kevin Kirkpatrick, coxswain of the current Longhope lifeboat, who lost his father, his uncle and grandfather on the night of the tragedy. And Kevin's wife Karen, of course, lost her grandfather, father and uncle also. 2 families, as well as a small community, left utterly, unimaginably devastated. The RNLI calls its crew members ordinary people who do extraordinary things. They are right. When conditions are of a type most of us would retreat from, the RNLI crews head straight into them because someone is in peril, someone needs help. The comparisons with mountain rescue services that Rhoda Grant drew, and perhaps Scottish Fire and Rescue, are obvious. And that was reinforced for me last year when I joined the current Arbroath lifeboat crew for a joint training exercise with a local fire and rescue. 2 different emergency services, but with a degree of commonality around the circumstances in which they are so often called into action. Presiding Officer, like any charity, the RNLI is heavily dependent on fundraising and donation. And it's pleasing that Scottish Government officials have a long-lasting and continuing commitment to supporting an official civil service charity called the Communications and Public Service Lifeboat Fund. That started in 1866 when a handful of civil servants decided they wanted to buy a lifeboat for the RNLI and raised the £300 it took them to do so. All monies raised by the Lifeboat Fund since have gone to help the RNLI's life-saving work. Down the years, the charity has supported the purchase of 53 lifeboats, as well as crew kit, lifeguard training and the refurbishing of lifeboat stations. The public service charity is the RNLI's longest-standing supporter. The Lifeboat Fund celebrated its 150th anniversary by raising £1.1 million for a Shannon-class lifeboat, the RNLI's latest design, with the efforts of the Scottish Government staff contributing more than any other single government body. And that's been followed by a new appeal that aims to reduce drowning in Scotland, the UK and overseas. Here in Scotland, children and young people are being helped to stay safe in and around water through a project in Fife, where RNLI lifeguarding is also being supported through the ongoing appeal. To conclude, Presiding Officer, the nature of the RNLI's role has evolved over its 195-year history, but the selflessness, the courage and the dedication which ran through the crew of the TGB when it set off that fateful day remains the characteristics demanded of crews today. So in marking the 50th anniversary of the Longhope lifeboat disaster, as William MacArthur has afforded us the opportunity to do today, let's acknowledge, as Rhoda Grant called on us to do, the enormous debt owed those who put themselves at risk to assist seafarers in trouble around Scotland's mainland coast and islands. Presiding Officer.
Thank you. Can I thank all members for their contributions? That concludes the debate and I suspend the